Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the New Jersey Education Association, PSC&G, committed to providing safe, reliable energy now and in the future. New Jersey Sharing Network, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, here when you need us most, now and always. RWJ Barnabas Health, the Turrell Fund, supporting Reimagine Childcare, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, the Northward Center, and by Wells Fargo. Promotional support provided by Insider NJ, and by AM 970 The Answer.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there is always something to learn.
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No.
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
That's a good question. High five.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We kick off the program with a woman we met. She was on a panel, Excellence in Education panel. It was just so powerful. It was terrific. And here she is. She's Kimberly Scott-Hayden. She's a 2021 National Education Association National Education Support Professional of the Year. That's otherwise known as an ESP, correct?
Yes, sir.
And also Inventory Control Clerk, East Orange Public Schools. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
By the way, what's an Inventory Control Clerk?
We actually assist in the shipping and handling of the district, all fixed assets that the district receive. We have our own warehousing system in our school district where you order paper, pens, different school supplies that the students may need or the office staff may need. We deliver to every school. We have 22 buildings in our district. So we handle a lot of logistics with barcoding, actually inventorying different items that the district has to have in the system that we purchase through our funding. So just keeping records of those types of things, various transactions between the school and vendors.
Got it. Hey, listen, the other thing that you brought up in the conversation, you talked about being an organ donor for your husband. And we have a collaboration with the New Jersey Sharing Network. We do public awareness around organ and tissue donation. Just for those who missed that segment, recount, if you will, what happened there?
So my husband was diagnosed as with kidney failure. When it reached stage 5, they had put him on the donors list, living or deceased donor. So we started going to some counseling sessions to find out what type of dialysis was available, looking at the 2 dialysis that were available and having background information because my dad was also in kidney failure and on dialysis prior to passing. So I knew how detrimental that was going to be for him and for his health. And my husband is young. He's only 54 years old. So it's like, you know, do I really want to see him go through these things? He's a retired police officer first and foremost. So I knew he did a lot of public service work and helping people. So I said, you know what, let's look at the possibilities of finding, he has 2 sisters. So maybe one of your sisters can be an organ donor. So we went to his younger sister and she was going to be an organ donor, but through some testing and research, we found out she had her own underlying issues that prevented her from doing so. So we remained on the donor list. We started taking educational classes around that. So in doing that, I said to my husband, I said, how about if I see if I'm a match? And lo and behold, I was. So on September 16th of 2020, I donated a kidney to my husband. It's been very successful. Thank God for that. He is thriving. All of the health issues that he had prior to have since dissipated. Wow. Myself, I just had my blood worked up and tests done on myself to make sure that the 1 kidney that I have is functioning at the levels that are good, you know, enough for me to not have any issues going forward. And lo and behold, I am doing well as well. So I am happy that I was able to help him and give him a second chance on life.
That's beautiful.
Together, yes, absolutely.
That's beautiful. By the way, let me disclose, my wife Jennifer is a kidney donor as well.
Oh, wow, nice.
And she's doing great and has been for a long time. Hey, listen, in the time we have left, you You are an educator, you are committed, but racial equity and justice a big priority for you. Got a minute left. Talk, please share with us.
As the chair of the Human and Civil Rights Committee for NJEA and part of the Amistad Work Group, it is my priority to make sure that our students are getting the curriculum that is required, right? So in other words, the Amistad curriculum speaks to the contributions of African Americans, not just the contributions around slavery, as there's more to our history. Our history is further, much more richer than just slavery. So the contributions of African American as far as inventing things, from building buildings, just telling our story, right? Our real story of who we are as a people.
Civil rights.
Exactly. So we are trying to, as educators across this nation, across the state of New Jersey, build this curriculum out that identifies the Amistad work that should be happening, as it is a law in the state of New Jersey. Many districts are not teaching it, those that are using it are not using it to its full potential. So actually trying to incorporate a curriculum that crosses from K to 12, but also is incorporated at every level of teaching, right? So whether you teach art, music, English, or whatever you're teaching, there is a way to incorporate the Amistad curriculum. So that speaks to the racial and social justice piece for most people, for my people, I should say, right? But there is also inequities in other races that we must identify, whether they're through our school system, whether they're in the workplace, because we know it happens all day. We can see what's going on in America. The last 4 years of where we were as a country speaks to a lot of social and racial injustice that has taken place. So for me, I'm impassioned about the work. I'm impassioned about making sure that our students are educated beyond what we have been doing. So that's just my personal story. I've learned a lot through that work, things I didn't even know as an African-American woman about my own people. I was educated on being in a room full of educators and various stakeholders across this great state.
Hey, Kimberly, you're not just a great guest, but you make a huge difference every day. And so to all the education support professionals, we say thank you. To all the educators, we say thank you. And very often they're one and the same. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for having me.
You got it. I'll be right back right after this.
To watch more One-on-One with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We are honored to be joined by the Honorable United States Congressman Donald Payne Jr. from the 10th Congressional District. Congressman, great to have you with us.
It's great to be here with you, Steve. Thank you.
Congressman, tell everyone your committee assignments are so significant and there's some new developments. So talk about that. What exact committees are you on?
Well, initially I serve on the Homeland Security Committee for the House of Representatives, and also Transportation Infrastructure, where I just become the chairman of rail pipelines and hazardous materials.
Important stuff. Do this for us. The American Rescue Plan, the $1.9 trillion Biden, if you will, plan. Impact on New Jersey and your district, and also you've had a hand in that as well.
Well, you know, Steve, we worked very diligently since last May to try to get some relief to the state and local governments. It was very important to us, not only making sure that our constituents received the $1,400 stimulus check, which was very important to many people, but we knew that the strain that the COVID pandemic placed on governments was very serious. And so we advocated since last May, actually, to get them some relief. And finally, under President Biden, we were able to do so in the American Rescue Plan. You know, it was very good for New Jersey, and along with my colleagues, we advocated that the state will get more than $10 billion to help pay for COVID expenses and other government-related expenses. So, you know, I fought for my district to get almost $920 million. So I'm very proud of that.
And we're taping on the 6th of April. This will be seen later. The infrastructure bill, and because you understand infrastructure more than most, it's not a sexy topic, but boy, is it important, Congressman, correct? Talk about why that particularly matters in our region.
Oh, my goodness. It is critical to our region for the simple fact that we have the Gateway project that we're trying to accomplish. Is a multi-billion-dollar project that would add an additional tunnel going into New York City under the Hudson River, and is crucial to us really repairing the other two tunnels. We need a third tunnel in order to do the repairs on the others, because you can't just have one with two-way traffic, obviously. And so we need to create the third tunnel in order to do the repairs on the other two that are over 100 years old. And believe me, Steve, you are glad that you go through there in the dark, because you would not want to see the disrepair of those tunnels.
And that's just Gateway, but you've got mass transit in there, you've got clean energy in there, you've got a whole range of initiatives, particularly in an older urban community. By the way, I was remiss, Congressman, let everyone know the specific communities you represent in the 10th District.
I represent communities in Hudson, Union, and Essex counties.
It's a very diverse district.
Very diverse, very diverse. Everywhere from Newark, New Jersey to Glen Ridge, so, and everything in between. So I have some of the most affluent Americans in the country and some of the neediest as well.
Congressman, let's talk January 6th, the insurrection, the attack on the United States Capitol. We asked your colleague, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, this. We've asked Mikey Sherrill, Congresswoman Sherrill, we've asked others. Just give us your view of why it was such a tragedy for this nation and is such a tragedy for this nation.
You know, Steve, it was still pretty surreal for me with what we witnessed that day. So-called American patriots storming the Capitol with the Confederate flag and using that as one of their mantles. It is a sight that, you know, for the life of me, I cannot get out of my head. You know, these rioters, and you know, it's interesting. It's interesting the difference when you have, you know, white Americans in the streets, they're protesters and they're civil disobedience. But when it's African Americans or Blacks that do the same thing, they're rioters. And, you know, this situation, I call them the treasonous insurrectors. And that's how I labeled them. It was
when former President, one second, I'm sorry for interrupting, Congressman. When former President Trump says, come on, it really, quote, I'm paraphrased, he not only said it wasn't that bad, he said in many ways they were heroes.
Well, you know, thank goodness he's the ex-president. I think that's
How much damage do you think he did to our nation, Congressman?
Oh, it's going to take us years to clean up a lot of the mess that he made. It is a situation that, God forbid that he had another 4 years. I don't know if this country could have survived. I finally saw how fragile, and people said it all my life, you know, how fragile this democracy is. I got to see just how fragile it was.
Yeah.
It was a situation that I was worried, were we going to be able to survive this president? But this country is resilient, the people are strong, and goodness and fairness won out in the end. And thank God he's the former president of the United States.
Congressman, you mind if we do this? You talked about how you grew up and what you heard about democracy being fragile. If you don't mind staying there, I would like to just, as we end this segment, can I just do a couple minutes with you in a separate interview that will air in a different program? We're actually doing a series looking at prominent African-American leaders in our nation, some of whom are no longer with us. And one of them, frankly, at the top of the list is your dad, the late Congressman Donald Payne, making history in our nation, the first African-American to serve in the congressional delegation in our state. Do you mind doing a couple minutes with us right after this to talk about your dad and why his legacy continues to be so important, not just for the district he represented, the state, but most importantly, the nation? Do you mind doing that?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay. Congressman, thank you for joining us for this segment. Go ahead. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention while we're on the topic of the 6th of January, I introduced a bill a week or so ago, which is the No Honor for Treason Act. And this bill will deny proper military funeral honors to any servicemen or women convicted of felony for the Capitol riots.
Important. Thank you, Congressman. Stay right there. That is Congressman Donald Payne, the 10th Congressional District. We're honored by you joining us. Thanks so much, Congressman.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
To watch more One-on-One with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We're now joined by Joel Finkelstein, who is co-founder and director of the Network Contagion Research Institute. Joel, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Steve. It's good to be here.
Tell everyone what the Institute is and why it matters so much.
Well, the Network Contagion Research Institute uses machine learning and big data approaches, almost like a telescope, to try and resolve emerging threats to democracy that are coming out of social media and festering as kind of, extremist and disinformation threats, within our democracy, both in the virtual and real worlds. And so our goal is to really cast a floodlight of transparency on that and contextualize these trends that are so important for our democracy, for lawmakers, for the media, for public institutions, and just as a kind of the people's intelligence agency, as it were.
So as we put up on the lower third our series, Democracy at a Crossroads, I'm going to ask you about January 6th and what the data that you and your colleagues found that made January 6th not that shocking at all.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I think many in the field, and we're included there, could tell that January the 6th could well be the next Charlottesville or worse. That was an assessment shared by many people in the field. Now, I think that how this happened it's really important for people to understand how an event like January the 6th unfolded. You had for almost several years in advance, you had black box algorithms from groups like Twitter. Back in June, we notified Twitter that this group QAnon was growing on their platform, speaking to executive leadership there, using our big data approaches to resolve the coded language and the conspiracies that were growing on the network, doubling within the month we'd studied it. And we said in that report, listen, this is turning into a revolutionary threat. They have an apocalyptic myth that's taking aim directly at law enforcement officials and lawmakers. They're arguing they're going to put those lawmakers in jail or harm them or worse. And they have an all-at-once go signal. Right? This is going to happen. This is likely something that's in the cards. So back in June, this is something we were warning the leadership of Twitter about, reporting to the Department of Homeland Security on, speaking to the Congress about. And so by the time the events of January the 6th happened, what we'd seen is that this wasn't an accident. This was something that had been in the works for literally a year or more, right? The conspiracy that set this off was the idea that they were going to march into the Capitol to put lawmakers in Guantanamo Bay, to arrest a pedophile ring, right? All of this had been put in the cards, months and months in advance. And they had practiced, coded communication with the president to create a kind of...
Joel, for example, coded communication with the president. What does that mean? You mean then President Trump?
Yeah. So at that point, what we had back in June and far afterwards was that the White House Twitter feed was creating a coded, rapid, interactive network-to-network communication with these conspiracy groups, where they would put forward populist conspiracies. Just beneath the surface of those populist conspiracies were dark and sinister implications. And the president would pick some of these populist code words, and all of these nasty conspiracies would come along for the ride. So it's like a super spreader event where the White House Twitter feed would pick out a code word that QAnon networks would generate. And then the selection of the code word created a kind of huge celebration amongst the QAnon networks, within the media. So this is a way of creating a coded language, an internal wink and a nod, literally, between the president.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but social media played a role in this. You're saying then President Trump played a role. The leaders of this organization, QAnon, played a role. What about us in the so-called mainstream media?
Well, I mean, I think that this is a huge issue, that the information ecosystem is very favorable to disinformation because it's sensational. I mean, Twitter was making a lot of money off of QAnon. They were monetizing this in a way that allowed them to pull in more advertising.
Well, what responsibility, excuse me for interrupting them, what responsibility does Twitter have, or other social media platforms that are, quote, making money off of not just hateful disinformation, but more importantly, dangerous misinformation?
Well, I think you're, going back to your original question, Steve, you said, what can we learn from January the 6th?
Yep.
Well, Twitter isn't alone in monetizing apocalyptic militia cults. Facebook did the same thing with the Boogaloo. It's fair to say that these platforms, it's not that extremist threats organize on them, it's that they organize extremist threats to our democracy. They're allowed to do that and decide who stays on and who stays off, until those threats emerge on the doorstep of our nation's capital and murder people. Then they decide who to censor. If they're the ones making the decisions about which threats to monetize, if they're the ones making the decisions about which threats to censor, then at the end of the day, what we learned from January the 6th is that the platforms won that revolution. They're becoming sovereign. They're becoming ungovernable. And these black box algorithms are essentially, outgassing this kind of extremism and disinformation into our democracy.
But Joel, it's such a scary, negative, dark picture you create. My only question is, what can and should be done to not fix, we don't fix, but deal and confront this situation as best we can?
So we're calling for new modes of transparency. The approaches that the NCRI and others use can create a floodlight of transparency on these threats long before they emerge. And these threats, they're targeting law enforcement officials. They're targeting lawmakers. They're targeting the people who implement our democracy, right? So those people have a right to know they're being threatened. And in terms of the protections we're offering these platforms, we should be asking ourselves, if we're protecting the platforms, how are they deserving that protection in protecting us, right? We need to make this a negotiation. We need to break the black boxes that are hiding our ability to have transparency on the threats that are affecting everybody. And no single person should have the right to monetize those threats on our behalf.
Got about a minute left. The connection between your organization and the Eagleton Institute and our friends down there with the director, John Farmer, who they've been actually sharing information with us and suggesting people like you join us. What's the connection to my alma mater at the Eagleton Institute at Rutgers?
Well, I have to say, we work very closely now in partnership with the Critical Intelligence Studies program at Rutgers and through the Eagleton Institute. And this has been absolutely transformative for our work. We have students from Rutgers who are actually in the Network Contagion Lab, which is partnered with Rutgers, who are providing us, who we are training with our tools, who provide us critical intelligence. These students in many ways are our front line and into these problems.
Few seconds, Joel. Few seconds. Go ahead.
Just, you have social media savvy, students who are really fighting for their democracy instead of being subject to a pasture that someone else is having them graze on.
Being passive, a status quo approach will not work here, correct?
That's right. The last point, Steve, that the rudest myth that has occurred because of our relationship with these platforms is human obsolescence. They want us to believe we're obsolete. That is the cruelest lie, and it's never been more false. We've never been needed more than now. That's the problem.
I've said this for years, and my staff sometimes laughs when I say democracy is not a spectator sport. There's never been more true than given the conversation we just had with Joel Finkelstein. Joel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure.
I'm Steve Adubato. Thank you so much. And remember that it is not a spectator sport. We're talking democracy. See you next time.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the New Jersey Education Association. PSC&G, New Jersey Sharing Network, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Turrell Fund, supporting Reimagine Childcare, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, the North Ward Center, and by Wells Fargo. Promotional support provided by Insider NJ and by AM 970 The Answer.
Hi, I'm Joe Roth. In New Jersey, there are nearly 4,000 residents in need of a life-saving organ transplant, and one person dies every 3 days waiting for this gift of life. One organ and tissue donor can save 8 lives and enhance the lives of over 75 people. You have the power to make a difference and give hope. For information or to become an organ and tissue donor, visit www.njsharingnetwork.org and be sure to talk with your family and friends about this life-saving decision.